Listen up or run for cover. Dropping knowledge from the people who have it to the people who need it. The real Brad Lee Bombs is dropping
What it is, Brad Lee, back again with another episode of Dropping Bombs. Today in the studio, folks, I've got a real treat for you. Mark T. Jackson, if you've never heard of him, he's an Army combat veteran, federal agent, and veterans advocate. Earlier this year, he became a lobbyist, provocateur, and advocate for veterans of a small secret base located in southern Uzbekistan called K2. So, I wanted to invite you here to, number one, get some awareness on this whole deal, but more importantly, just freaking pick your brain about a whole bunch of this stuff that, you know, hopefully will allow people to understand and or reach out and help get veterans some help.
I appreciate it. It's good to be here. I can tell you there's a lot to pick.
Well, dude, we were talking in the green room. I'm like, shit, dude, let's get on the microphone. This is crazy. This is crazy shit. It's almost like, dude, you're almost like, so right now you're a federal agent.
Yeah.
And you investigate shit for the Army.
Yes, that's my full-time job.
And ultimately you, back in the day, got assigned to K2.
That's correct. Yeah.
Which you went over there just like you were told to do as part of every soldier that went over there.
That's right.
And then, long story short, there was some toxic shit over there. Everybody's getting sick. Now nobody wants to recognize it.
That is a very good summary of what happened. So I was active duty Army. My agency's odd. It's like NCIS, the TV show, minus everything in the TV show, right? So you have the active duty side that investigates active duty stuff, like, for example, all the things that are happening at Fort Hood right now.
What's happening there?
There's just been a lot of issues with soldiers dying.
What about that? Some soldier disappeared.
Yeah, that would be our agency and in coordination with whomever else. I'm not involved with any of that.
Oh, you're not?
No, definitely not.
But that's the type of stuff you're talking about? Murders, disappearances, fraud.
Yep.
What about if soldiers like are somewhere, like let's say Iraq, and they kicked in a door and found $30 million and they took it? Do you investigate that shit?
I've investigated exactly that.
Is it illegal for them to take?
It is illegal for them to take, for sure.
That should be spoils of war.
Well, it's our money usually. So the way it worked back then is, especially early in the Iraq War, is they would put $100 bills wrapped on pallets, put them onto a C-17 or a C-130, unload them, put them in frankly a shipping container with bars on the windows, and then pay out people backpacks full of money to do stuff for us.
Wow.
So that left a lot of room for people to make a lot of really bad, life-changing decisions.
Oh, yeah. See, there's just too much to talk about, but I don't want to take attention away from the real reason we're here. So if I get into these too far, I just need to remind people listening that, number one, this isn't a movie. This isn't false. This isn't freaking made up. This is, number one, your life.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be a movie. I think it's going to be a book for sure. But Mark T. Jackson, folks, look him up. If you're on Instagram, go check him out at is it SFF?
SFF_K2. So that's for the Stronghold Freedom Foundation.
Stronghold Freedom Foundation.
And that is a foundation that was established, 501c3, that some K2 veterans got together and established in February of this year. So we're brand new, because until December of last year, nobody had said anything in public about K2. There was a Facebook page put together by a guy by the name of PJ Widener. Him and his best friend, Mike West, put a Facebook page together because Mike West was dying of cancer in 2012. And they knew other dudes that were dying of cancer. And the only thing all these dudes had in common was that they'd been to K2 in Uzbekistan back between 01 and 05 when the base existed. So when Mike West died, PJ was there with him and promised him that he'd get something done. And PJ, for the next 7.5 years, did that by himself. Had a couple hundred people on the Facebook page. Finally, a reporter picked up on it from McClatchy newspapers in D.C., and then that's where I found out about it. because you think you're alone.
And you were like, hey, I was there.
Yes, right.
Now, did you ever have cancer?
No, I've been relatively lucky. So I'm athletic. I do ultra marathons. I try to eat right. I do yoga, all that stuff. Try to stay just generally fit, right? But when I was 27, so about a year after I got back from K2, I went from being able to run a marathon to not being able to run or walk up a step of stairs. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I went to my doctor, and they did a simple blood draw, and my thyroid was dead. Completely dead, which I don't want to give away the ending, but that's symptomatic of exposure to radiation, among other chemicals. And so anyhow, it was profound, like it's completely gone. And that's one of the more common cancers that we have in people. Mine has not turned cancerous yet. I've been warned that whatever's on it, nodules or whatever I'm not a doctor, but I know it's going to have to come out eventually. Not yet. I wound up with osteoporosis in my lumbar spine. Again, exposure. My wife's gonna be mad if I forget all these. Non-iron deficient anemia, again, radiation and/or other chemicals, a brain fenestration, and all these. I consider all these minor because we have people dying, because we have people with cancer, right? And my stuff's annoying. I take a handful of pills, a little bit of iron here, a little bit of Synthroid there, some stuff for some digestive stuff, diverticulosis. That's the worst, because that's symptomatic, right? You have to actually take things to kind of calm that down. But all that started when I was young. I was a very young man when all that started. And there's a lot of other people who have that. Now, it's not universal. That's not how exposure works, right? So of the 5,000 or so people that we represent in our organization, of the 10,000 that went, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 are sick. So somewhere around 40% are sick of something. And all of us have similar symptoms.
So let's take everybody back to that K2. Where is K2 and how'd you end up there?
So K2 is taken from the name of the two cities near there, Karshi and Khanabad, Uzbekistan. So if you look at a map, Uzbekistan's a double landlocked country shaped a little bit like a peanut, tucked in between Kazakhstan and Afghanistan, and then it borders a bunch of other stands too. It used to be near the Aral Sea, which is since dried up, and it's a former Soviet republic. K2 was the base that the Soviets used. They didn't call it K2. I couldn't tell you what they called it. But they used K2 to invade northern Afghanistan, which is exactly what we used the base for 22 years later in 2001. So after the attacks of 9/11, President Bush, in the smoldering ruins, sat there and said, yup, we're going to go hook whoever did this up. And I think they gave the Taliban 2 weeks. And during that 2 weeks, we sent people over to southern Uzbekistan to this old Soviet base that was underused. So the Uzbek Air Force was still there. To tell you a little bit about the Uzbek Air Force, they had about 50 MiGs, maybe more, and 5 pilots. And I'm pretty sure they were just swapping out parts for the 2 that flew. So not a robust Air Force, but the runway was good. It's a 2-mile-long runway, lots of bunkers there, and lots of room for us to put up a base. It was already pretty much secure. And Uzbekistan at the time, and still is, very much a police state. So it was a safe place for us to go, and only about 100 kilometers north of northern Afghanistan. So we sent in special forces, we sent in some combat engineers, and we sent in a couple of environmental scientists alongside them to see what was up. And what was up was that there was depleted uranium and yellow cake uranium and give or take 400 other substances identified at the time. This is in October, November of 2001. They were aware. We needed the base though, right? So, I mean, to me, that outweighs everything. And I want to make clear that in spite of everything I'm about to say, in spite of everything that I already know, I'd still go back. This will never be about not wanting to serve, to being afraid of not wanting to go to war. That's our job, right? But we're going to get recognition for what I'm telling you. So that's kind of my caveat to everything I'm going to say. I'm not complaining, and I'm not asking for anything except for the government to recognize that they sent 10,100 people there, of which 40% are sick, dying, or dead. So anyhow, we occupied the space. We sent in some combat engineers, but the early guys that went in stayed in those bunkers I was telling you about. So if you've ever seen like Chuck Norris movies or 80s Stallone movies, and they go into the former Soviet Union, those grass-covered bunkers with the big iron doors, those exist. And that's what the base had. That portion of the base at the end of the runway, we probably had, if I had to guess, probably like 200 acres, not a giant footprint. And they would use those to store any number of things. What they did store in there was chemical weapons. and radioactive things. And during the course of their occupation, they were demilitarizing a lot of those weapons, and they had several accidents during those demilitarizations. So there were explosions, and that shit went everywhere, and it was just laying on the ground. So when we first got there and all this shit was laying on the ground, we're like, we should move that shit. So they did. They scooped it into piles and built a berm around the base. And then they dug a couple of lakes. Like if you've ever been to Florida, where I live, you can't build anything without digging down. So you got to have somewhere for the water to go. And this part of Uzbekistan's not dissimilar to that. So that's what they did. And then put the base on the inside of those berms, put some concertina wire on the top, a couple observation posts, a gate on one side. Now you have a base. So they put down gravel on top of that, the rest of that contaminated dirt, and then they put up the tent city.
Which is where you guys stayed.
Which is where we lived, yeah. I was lucky enough. By the time I got there in 2003, they started building what are called sea huts. Sea huts are kind of look like a really crappy beach house, like kind of like a shotgun shack, and you can throw anywhere from 8 to 20 dudes in there, depending on how many bunk beds and how big it is. We eventually got plumbing though, which was super weird for that early in the war. I got to have pretty regular showers there for the last 90 days I was there. So, but anyhow, so as our early guys were there, people were getting sick from any number, just weird stuff.
While they were there?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Early on, in particular, in fact, a lot of this stuff is going to be anecdotal. We do have written accounts of this, like sworn statements. Dudes were writing sworn statements, having somebody raising the right hand and having them swear to it. And we have those at the foundation, actually on our website. If anybody wants to see any of this stuff, not only can I back it up, you can go in there and look at it. There's been a bunch of, we'll get to it, but there's been a lot of documents declassified recently as a direct result of some of the stuff that we're trying to work on. So anyhow, the guys started getting sick, and the Uzbek workers that were there, like the locals that they're pulling over from the town of Karshi. Karshi is a big city, by the way. It's like 400,000 people. I'll call it a modern city. It's a modern Soviet city. So if you ever seen pictures of the old Soviet Union with the boxy buildings and the big wide boulevards and the weird trees with the painted trunks and the giant weird monuments and stuff, that's what they had there. But then you mix in like the fact that the city itself is like 2,000 years old. So you have like a madrasa that's been used since like Alexander the Great rolled through there. That Marco Polo wrote about. I mean, Uzbekistan's a cool place. You don't think you've heard about it, then you start thinking about, all right, I've heard of the Aral Sea, and I've heard of Samarkand, and you've heard of Genghis Khan, because his grandson, Tamerlane, he was from, I think it was Bukhara, which is a really old walled city. Like when you go there, like his palace is still there. Like I've walked into it. Like it's like this 1,200-year-old Khan's house just sitting in this walled city. But I don't mean to get off track, but it's a cool place to go, and nobody's been there, right? I mean, it's just who's been to Uzbekistan, but so anyhow,
10,100 of you.
Yeah, 10,100 of us. That's exactly right.
But before you continue,
sure.
So why is there no record of it?
So it's not that there's no record, right? You can Google it, and there's like contemporary newspaper articles that are like Uzbek base established by U.S. forces, Uzbek base closed because we have a disagreement with the Uzbek government, that kind of stuff. And then
but no mention of Uzbek base has chemicals and shit and people are dying.
That's correct. Not until December of 2019, and then a whole lot more over the past 9 months.
But you would think military keeps impeccable records, no?
They did. We have them.
So the records are there that people are saying, hey, I'm sick, hey, I'm this, hey, my spleen's falling out. And they're in the records, but nobody wants to acknowledge them?
That is the situation in which we find ourselves. And I don't want to cast aspersions on the Department of Defense or on the Department of Veterans Affairs, but it's their responsibility, right?
Sure, but if the records are there, you'd think they'd be like, holy shit, let's get you some help.
So we'll go back to Uzbekistan in a second. I've learned all this in the past 9 months. Like I'm a veteran, and I get some VA benefits from my service, from my thyroid, right? I mean, they do compensate me. A thyroid, by the way, if you're wondering, is worth about $120 a month if you lose it while you're in service, or if it's service related. So the way the VA works, and the way generally that healthcare works for soldiers that are injured, right? So if you're injured while you're in active duty, you die while you're in active duty, you are covered, your family is covered. you're good. You're going to get everything from the post 9/11 GI Bill to good benefits all the way through your kids until they're like 26. And then you yourself, if you're the surviving spouse, you're going to have a paycheck and a retirement for the rest of your life, right? Or at least until you hit Social Security. And you're going to have VA benefits too. If you're the veteran, if you did survive, you're going to have whatever retirement you get from your injury or your sickness that you got while you're in service, and there'll be some sort of compensatory VA benefit as well. You'll be able to get preventative care. You'll be able to get everything, medicine, you name it. If you were at K2 and you got sick after you got out of the military and you went into the VA and said, I'm really sick and I have all these symptoms, and I was at K2 Uzbekistan, the VA is going to say, cool, it's not in the Code of Federal Regulations, it's not in the U.S. Code, nowhere in any federal regulation is Uzbekistan recognized as a place to which we deployed soldiers and recognized as part of what's called the larger Southwest Asia Theater of Operations.
Okay, so to me, that's where I'd say why. The records are there. We were there. I don't give a shit what your regulations say. You made an omission.
They did, and that's what we're trying to do. If I could boil down, you and I are going to talk for like an hour and a half. I'm going to boil it down to one word. We can make this a 30-second podcast. Add Uzbekistan to 38 CFR. One word. All I want is one word.
And then everybody would get help, because when the I don't want to call them lackeys, but people that weren't there that are just following the stupid ass code, and well, in order to give you that coverage, I have to see it on this list, and it's not on the list. Those people.
Yes.
Because if it was on the list, they'd be like, oh, and they'd handle you. But who decides it goes on the list?
So there's, and again, I'm still a layman, although I've done I've been involved a lot with Congress and with speaking with the DoD and the VA. This can be done in several different ways. You can have a law that is passed saying K2 veterans will receive this. It's like what they did for Agent Orange, right? So, which, by the way, interesting fact, took Agent Orange guys right around 18 years to get some legislation. We're at 18 years for K2. So I think that's just a government thing. But I don't want to say we're the same as Agent Orange because there were so many of them. Again, we're only 10,100, but the situation's not dissimilar. We're talking about something that's essentially the same thing. It's an oversight, right? So Afghanistan is in 38 CFR. And what 38 CFR, and they've added on to the 38 CFR that covers Southwest Asia. Uzbekistan and Afghanistan are in Central Asia. Doesn't matter. Call it a theater of operations, add them into that Gulf War registry. That's really what that does, is it puts people in the Gulf War registry, lets them sign in for burn pits. We should talk about burn pits at some point. It lets them have some presumptive conditioning for diseases that are caused by those burn pits, and some exposures. So toxic exposures in the military is a whole thing right now. In fact, there's a whole act called the Toxic Exposure in the American Military Act of 2020. It's great. The VFW is behind it, along with about 20 other kind of grassroots organizations, 501c3s like ours. The problem is that proposed legislation doesn't mention Uzbekistan either, except in passing. What it says is that if you received hazardous duty pay, you get extra pay for going to combat. It's usually a percentage of whatever your base pay is. So what it says, if you got hazardous duty pay, which usually means combat, then you're included in parts of this legislation. My problem is that just good enough has not helped 40% of the people that went to K2 that are now seeking care, right? They can't get it. So while that might help them, to me, it's disingenuous if you're not saying the word. Uzbekistan, we were there. It was real. The war started there. It was a rotational base that everybody went through. It happened. Say it. And that's really where I'm starting to get. When I speak to the Senate, I spoke to Senate staffers today, right before I came on your show, because I'm doing that. I'm taking leave from work, right? It's pandemic, so I've been teleworking, right? So I've had time to do this. But I'll take an hour leave and I'll get on the phone with a representative or with their staff or with whoever they identify that I should talk to and tell them exactly what I'm telling you. A lot of times what they say is, what you said. Wait, so what do you mean Uzbekistan isn't in the CFR? What do you mean it's not recognized as a deployed location? They're incredulous. And as people have gotten to know, that's why you have what I consider to be very brave politicians that are putting forward this legislation because there is resistance to it.
Why?
So I don't know. You know, we
This is what pisses me off, though. It's like, is our government too big, or are they too stupid, or are they too evil? Is it evil?
It feels like slippery slope, right? That's when I have the conversations with people, it feels like if we say presumptive condition, right? That's the VA is going to cringe a little bit because there's a dollar amount attached to that, right?
Yeah, but so what, dude? They're printing money like it's going out of style. Okay.
When I see us drop however many trillions of dollars and ours would be in the millions, it's not like I have those millions, but we're talking about a very small amount. And of that 40%, how many are already covered, right? So
not only that, dude, you guys sacrificed I believe if somebody gets injured and fights in the war, any war, if you're there for us, right or wrong, either, I don't really care. If Vietnam, shouldn't have been there. Dude, if an American goes to war, they come home, they should be covered for life, regardless of anything that happened there or because of there. And I believe this goes an extra mile. They shouldn't have to pay taxes.
Oh, I wouldn't complain about that one.
They're paid in full. That's. I'm serious. If I ever ran for president and became president, I'd be initiating a bill that says all injured war veterans are paid in full. You lose a leg for the United States Army, dude, you're fucking paid in full. I don't need a piece of your income when you go make some with your one leg. Okay? You can keep it. Why? Because you lost your leg for us. So guess what? Keep the money you're making. We'll be fine without your $960. Okay? Because again, we're talking about freaking taxing a whole bunch of people is a lot of money, but letting 10,000 people get freaking medical care, letting 10,000 people not pay taxes, it's not going to amount to shit. It's peanuts compared to what they're blowing on a bunch of stuff that's just ridiculousness.
You know, I try not. It's funny. I'm dealing with politicians and find myself in a very politicized position. I mean, I got permission from my agency to do what I'm doing, right? I mean, that required, both verbal and written position.
I'm surprised.
Fortunately, other than mentioning to you what I do for a living, just because it's an amusing anecdote to otherwise I'm just a tattooed dude in a t-shirt.
Yeah, he's got sleeves. If you guys are watching the video, if you're listening to the audio, he's got sleeves. He looks like a freaking undercover, federal agent that busts up, biker meth labs. But at the end of the day, you're an active duty federal agent that investigates crime for the Army, whatever department, CID type department. I would assume they'd be like, Mark, shut the fuck up.
No, because I'm not using that to gain anything. It's not like I'm going in there and saying, you'll do this because I'm who I am. That's just incidental to my job. We have a school teacher on our board of directors. We have a couple of retired soldiers, and a lot of our volunteers are disabled veterans, or we have vice presidents of their own companies. So we all that's relevant, right? What do you do in your real job, and what are you doing in the other 20 hours, 30, 40, 50 hours a week that you're working with our all volunteer organization, trying to get the word out, while at the same time trying to get legislation, and all of this, by the way, during a pandemic. So I couldn't tell you what this looks like when things are normal, or when things even go back to normal. I've only ever done this since we testified to Congress. I know I'm getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. All this has been done by teleconference, email, and phone calls. And we're still starting to see results. We're still able to do things like fly from Florida to Las Vegas and talk on a podcast about this, where even a week ago you guys hadn't even heard of this. And that's the whole point. And here's the other thing. It's kind of a cool story, right? We were in Uzbekistan 2 weeks after 9/11 on an old Soviet base that they themselves had used to invade the same country unsuccessfully. I won't make any comments on how successful or unsuccessful we've been, but we occupied all their old bases, right? So
they must have allowed that.
Oh yeah. Well, the Afghans. The Afghans didn't have any say in it until after we got there and established a new government and got the status of forces agreement, and then we were like, "Is it okay if we keep these things we took?" But
what did they say?
They said, "Of course, you can keep them," since we'd already occupied them and put up fences and towers with the guns pointing out. And they said, "Sure, that'd be great. Help us fight the Taliban."
Are we still there?
Oh yeah.
Well, what about the poison? Was it removed?
Now K2 we're not, but we're at all of our old bases, old Soviet bases down Afghanistan. In fact, my son-in-law is in Afghanistan as we speak at Bagram.
What's his name?
His name is Kyle Lepore.
Does he have an Instagram?
I guarantee that he does, and I could look it up. I could text my daughter and have her. She's gonna be so mad that I didn't know it.
Text her.
All right.
We'll get the bomb squad to shoot him out some love from America.
Actually, I'll text my wife and
everybody tag this guy. Freaking send him some love.
He will love that. So he has a little bit of Wi-Fi. He does intelligence related stuff. I definitely don't want to get into too much depth about that. Hang on. What's Kyle's Instagram? Yeah, if people hit him up, he will absolutely eat that up. You asked me how I got to Uzbekistan, right? So, because we had special forces there, we had everybody else there. I got there because I was an active duty soldier, right? I'm no longer a soldier. You can look at me and you know immediately that guy is definitely not a soldier. But I went there. I got orders in April of 2003, got on a plane in July of 2003 at Fort Benning, Georgia, flew to Baltimore, flew to Turkey, flew to Kyrgyzstan. There's a base there called Manas, also an old Soviet air base. And I got on a New Zealand Air Force plane. And this isn't important to the story, but I've never told this story, so I feel like you might like it. So we wait in the sun all day, right? And this place is bombed out because we haven't been there very long. The infrastructure hasn't been supported. So we're just sitting in the sun. It's Las Vegas hot. It's miserable. We've been on a plane for 36 hours. They don't let you get off the plane all those places I just mentioned. Maybe you get off, take a leak, but you have to stay like right there next to the plane. It's like a charter flight. It looks like a regular 737, except it ain't. And then we were getting on a C-130, and it's New Zealand Air Force C-130, right? We're walking up on it, and there's a Kiwi loadmaster. It's the guy that makes sure everybody sits where they're supposed to in the back, make sure everything's balanced on this cargo plane, right? And there's probably, if I had to guess, 120 dudes that are going down to Bagram, Afghanistan. It's our main hub base just north of Kabul, right? It's where Kyle is right now. So she hasn't texted me back yet. But as I'm walking up to the plane, the guy's sitting there. He's listening to Guns N' Roses, right? He's listening to Paradise City. He's got this shitty little boombox with a tape. It's 2003, right? He doesn't even have a CD player. He's got a cassette tape playing Guns N' Roses, Paradise City, as we're getting on this plane. And I'm not even going to attempt to do the accent, but it's a quality, thick, what I would consider maybe even a redneck Kiwi accent. And on the side of his plane has all the usual markings. New Zealand Air Force, it has the flag, it has the numbers of the plane, and then it has, in capital letters, black, bigger than any other letter on there, across the nose of the plane, TWAT. So I stop, and I'm like, your plane says twat. And he goes, oi, it's the war against terror. So we get on the plane, the twat plane, the war against terror plane, and we fly down to Bagram, and that was my first experience with combat landings, which is essentially a very steep landing into and I'm sure there's pilots listening like, no, it's not what it is. It's really steep. You have to hold on to like the cargo nets behind you because you're in the back of a cargo plane. And they land into Bagram, and the bottom door drops out, and any veteran that's listened to this that's been to Bagram in the summer will know what I'm talking about. It looks like Mars. You've seen pictures of those satellites on Mars during a sandstorm? That's what Bagram looks like. Doesn't look like anything. It just looks like red sand, and it smells like camel shit and people shit and diesel fuel, burn pits, plastic, you name it, jet fuel. So I walked off of that. I was there for a couple of days with a small unit, and I got sent by myself to replace one other dude that did what I did up in Uzbekistan. So that was when I got down into Uzbekistan. I remember all this so well, by the way, is because the 4 times that I've been deployed, I keep a journal, just like a spiral notebook, handwritten journal, day by day. So I remember what I did by those days. I actually have them with me, the digital copies, the original copies are sacred. I keep them locked up at home. But I know exactly what I did and where I went because even when I was like out, like say going down to Kandahar, or going out and doing other stuff, or driving around, or you name it, I'd keep a little like travel journal in my pocket so I could make sure, before I went to bed or whenever I had a minute. A lot of those were written in the back of C-130s or helicopters flying back and forth to doing whatever in the back of a Land Cruiser. By the way, we weren't rolling around in tanks or armored vehicles back then. It was mostly soft-skinned Land Cruisers, right side drive, that we'd kind of gotten from Pakistan. early on. To be fair, the Iraq War was just starting, and the insurgency hadn't really started yet, so they weren't super good at like IEDs and all that stuff. So that wasn't happening with the frequency that you see, not so much in Afghanistan, but that you wound up seeing in Iraq. It did happen in Afghanistan plenty of times. Those are different stories. But so anyhow, at K2, the base probably had a population of between, if I had to guess, between 800 and 1,200 at any given time. Half of that was on a compound inside the compound. That was the Joint Special Operations guys, who have been disproportionately affected by this simply because of where they were on the base. Because now that we're back in Uzbekistan, remember they built the base, they built the tent city, the chow hall was in a tent, the gym was in a tent, fire station's in a tent. We wound up getting tent latrines, which if you've never had the pleasure, it's called a GP medium tent. So you've seen standard Army tent, right? You can do anything with them. So that a latrine tent is where you put a tent over trenches that are dug kind of parallel to each other. This one actually had a trough that went kind of down with a trickle of water the whole time. And you just put toilet seats and then shower curtains in between. Sometimes you'll be lucky enough to have a shower curtain blocking off both behind and in front of you. I think this one did have that. So that was that. And then the shower tent was very similar to that, pallets. And by the way, we were lucky. We had showers. We had toilets. In fact, we even had porta-johns that each day, twice a day, the Uzbek honey wagon would come by and clean out. And you would know when it was time for these things to be cleaned out because they snow cone. And I'll let you use your imagination on what a snow cone. You've probably been to a festival, music festival before. You know what I'm talking about. That was a daily thing for us in the 140-degree environment of the porta-johns, because those are more convenient. They put those down by like the main base, by the airfield, so we were able to use those.
And that's not what even was toxic.
No,
That was the good stuff.
Turns out that was just like normal toxic. So those bunkers were in use when I got there, even though guys had gotten sick, even though there had been measurable amounts of chemical weapons like mustard gas. They found mustard gas, chlorine gas, a whole bunch of other stuff. And again, on our website, I have links to all of these.
What is the website?
It's strongholdfreedomfoundation.org. And you go on there, you can see a picture of me without a beard, actually, on the board of directors page. And we have links to all of the documents. The reason we know the number of those chemicals is because they were declassified by the DOD about 6 weeks ago. And that was, I am going to do a name drop here. That is directly because of pressure put on the DOD by Representative Mark Green from Tennessee and Representative Stephen Lynch from Massachusetts.
Good for them.
Without those two men helping, and that's a Democrat and a Republican, without their help and without their early involvement, none of this would have happened. And I will say at this point, Representative Green is a survivor of two primary cancers. He's also a doctor, a physician. He survived brain cancer and colon cancer, which are two of the big cancers that we have from K2 veterans. He was at K2, he was there early, and he was there often. He believes that it might have been related to burn pits.
What are burn pits?
Right. So, yeah, I've dropped that quite a few times. So the military didn't have landfills when we were over there, and we had nowhere to send all our waste, and we were generating a lot of waste at all of our bases. Everything was in plastic bottles. Everything's, you have to be able to throw everything away, right? You just drop it, move on. Plastic bottles, boxes that brought in our food, you name it, everything. Where do you put that? Well, you dig a hole. I'll use Bagram as an example, but I could tell you all about the ones in Iraq or down in Kandahar, even the one at K2. But Bagram has a special place in my heart since I've lived there 3 times. You dig a hole down in Bagram's case. In my mind, it went down to the depths of hell, possibly the center of the earth. It was probably more like 50 feet deep and probably a football field across. And it was kind of, roughly a circle. And every day, trucks would come over there and dump, just trash trucks, dump trucks full of garbage, and dump them in there. Any trash, medical trash, plastic, and anything else that will burn. And most things will burn if you put them into a pit, keep dumping diesel onto them, and then dump other shit on top of it. And there were burn pits at almost every base that we had since 2001. I don't want to say every because I don't know that it was every. It was at every one I went to, had a burn pit. And depending on which way the wind was blowing, brother, you were breathing that stuff. You could see it, you could smell it, you could feel it. And there are a lot of guys. And that's why when I talked about the Team Act of 2020, it doesn't help Uzbekistan. So it's not what I'm here to talk about, but it is a very important piece of legislation. because what it'll do is it will provide help for all those people. They haven't done any studies in the burn pit. There's a registry saying, I was near a burn pit. I'm on it, right? Because I live near burn pits. By the way, K2 veterans can't get on it, even though we had a burn pit, because Uzbekistan is not recognized as a deployed location in the Southwest Theater of Operations. It's not in the 38 CFR. So that's what the Team Act of 2020 does, a whole bunch of that. What the various K2 legislations are doing, and I know we left Uzbekistan, we'll go back. But what the various legislations are doing that have been introduced, and we'll start with Mr. Green and Mr. Lynch, since they did it. So Mr. Green and Mr. Lynch saw some of the media coverage, and we had, we weren't even necessarily a foundation. It was PJ, who I mentioned earlier, a Gold Star widow named Kim Brooks. Her husband was one of the first casualties of K2. He was a special operator. He was a lieutenant colonel. 4 kids, all under the age of 18 at the time. He was 36. He was at K2 from 01 into 02, and Kim, I'm sorry if I got those dates wrong, but I know I'm close. He was home for a year. I would have just landed in K2 for my first tour when at Fort Drum, New York. He was standing you've seen military formations. He was standing in the military formation, suddenly had a thunderclap headache, started screaming, ran outside, went to the hospital with his wife, was diagnosed with an extremely rare form of brain cancer, and was dead 9 months later. That is K2's legacy. And Kim Brooks is on our board of directors. In fact, when we speak to Senate and their staff, she's brilliant. She's a school teacher. Her kids, check this out, and this is what happens when you die in service, right? As opposed to dying later, getting sick and dying later. They're covered by the post 9/11 GI Bill. They had good medical coverage. Kim's a school teacher, right? She has a kid that went to Harvard, a kid that went to Yale, a kid that went to West Point, and a kid that now plays Division I at Georgetown. That would not have happened if Colonel Brooks had come home and died after he got out of the military. And it's a good example of what we're trying to do here. And I'm oversimplifying healthcare and the VA. I'm not going to get into the nuance. But if you want to get into why we're doing that, I talk to her every day, right? She has spent, you want to talk about this being my life, she had to raise 4 kids by herself. Mm-hmm. At least she had the money to do it. So they were, Kim and PJ and one other gentleman who did have thyroid cancer, Tim Welch was his name. He was a warrant officer at K2, an intel guy that did intel for JSOC. I'm trying not to use all the acronyms. It's hard when you dealt with them for 25 years. But the Joint Special Operations guys, he had primary thyroid cancer. It's something I have to look forward to, according to my endocrinologist, but not yet. You don't take a thyroid out until you really need to, because it can affect the parathyroids, and I already have osteoporosis. So there's already issues with my calcium. So anyhow, they went up to Capitol Hill. I happened to be in D.C. for work. A friend of mine who was on this Facebook page that PJ had, she called me and she goes, you need to get in touch with these guys and see if you can help. Okay. And I called them. They said, yeah, come help. Come meet us up on Capitol Hill. So I drove up from Alexandria, Virginia, across the river, and met those guys on Capitol Hill and found myself in front of the House Oversight and Reform Committee a couple days later. I provided written testimony, but if you look at the video of the testimony, I'm sitting right behind these guys. Like I know what I'm doing. And as it turns out, if you pretend early and then just keep going, you learn it along the way. My kids are going to laugh at this, but a lot of it has to do with confidence. You know, my lesson from this is you look somebody straight in the eye and you're confident and you know you're right, then eventually you're definitely going to be right. And that's what we've been doing. At least that's what I've been doing. We have way more competent people than me. I happen to be able to sometimes spin a good story, so they sent me out into the wild. Maybe my wife.
Yeah, you're a good storyteller. That's for darn sure. Anybody watching this is like, I wonder why Brad's not talking and interrupting.
I got it. All right. So Kyle's Instagram is HEREFORAKYLE. Here for a Kyle at Instagram. He's going
here for a Kyle.
Here for a Kyle.
Instead of here for a while.
Yes.
Folks, on Instagram, go hit him up. Bomb Squad, do your part, man. Go hit him up. Make sure you hit hashtag Bomb Squad at Here for a Kyle.
That's it.
On Instagram. Tell him you love him, you support him. Tell him old freaking Mark T was here and told us to shout out to him from Mark T. Jackson.
He knows I was coming. So I'll give a shout out to his wife, my oldest daughter. So my granddaughter is 16 months old. They got married, and they actually got married first. Then they got pregnant, and then he joined the Army. So there was actually an order to everything. It wasn't a shotgun wedding or anything. But my daughter and granddaughter have been living with me. They moved in with us like right before everything shut down. But she is 8 months pregnant. And shout out to the Army. He said, "Can I go home and see my baby get born?" When I asked that question, when my oldest daughter was born, they said, no. For him, they're flying him home from Afghanistan in enough time to do a 2-week quarantine at Fort Hood and then fly to stay at my house for an extra 3 weeks of paternity leave before he has to report back to his unit at Fort Hood. That is awesome. That is taking care of somebody.
That's right. And you said a 2-week quarantine.
Yeah, so the Army, anytime so I'm DOD. That's the reason all my employees are still teleworking, is that because it's such a large organization, you just can't have all these moving parts going in and out of areas that may or may not be infected. The rates have been very low in the DOD. Who knows? Maybe because of that policy, maybe not.
Are you allowed to comment on COVID?
Sure. You want my? I mean, yeah, we can do opinions, or we can.
No, what is your? Well, I believe I said the other day, everybody's is just opinions. Nobody really knows what's going on. I have a feeling there's an agenda, and people are taking advantage of a situation. People always say, "You don't believe in COVID." Dude, I totally believe in COVID. It's real. I know this. I just don't believe the masks, the quarantines, and all that shit is because of COVID. I think that's the agenda. Someone's leveraging COVID to do all these things for a bigger purpose. That's what I think.
So, since I've been hiding in my house since March, and so have my employees, we haven't had a choice. I mean, I close my office. We call it ad hoc, right? So they can go into the office and they can work there then. From a DoD perspective, they're treating it like they do any threat. This could be a threat outside the wire, right? If you know that there's an insurgent out there, then you're going to put up every defense that you have, whether you need it or not. So that's been my approach. So I guess I hadn't really considered the whys, which I mean, to your larger point, perhaps that's part of the problem. I hadn't questioned it. Really, all I'd done is just kind of done it. But that was more of a professional responsibility to my subordinates as opposed to anything else.
And that's how you're trained.
Correct. Yeah.
You're trained to do what the fuck you're told.
Yeah. You kind of see my answer, and it's not that I don't think for myself. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. But at the same time, when it comes to something like that, it's kind of like when we do search warrants, right? Like there is a protocol on a search warrant. Oh, you don't want to wear your vest? I don't give a shit. Put your vest on, and we're going to go in. We're going to stack on the doors, and we're going to cover the perimeters. Everybody's going to have a radio here. Because you train for all that, and those things are done by that kind of rote, memorized, practiced routine, because in the military and even within law enforcement, you have to calculate all the way down to the lowest common denominator, right? Because there's going to be that guy that's sitting over there, maybe texting on Instagram or with his finger all the way up his nose, right? Not paying attention. And the guy I just mentioned is actually for sure somebody I went to basic training with. So I'm sorry I didn't mean to get so wildly off base, but. So anyhow, my time at K2 was split between a lot of different doing a lot of different tasks. I worked primarily with military police, doing some internal stuff, internal investigation, smuggling, heroin. Heroin's a thing you've probably heard in that part of the world. So we dealt with heroin a lot. People wanted to steal weapons, like really cool AK-47s that they traded, some U.S. property with an Uzbek for, and then they're trying to ship it home. So we did that. I took one epic trip. It was about probably 1,200 kilometers round trip from down there in Bagram all the way up to the far northern reaches of Uzbekistan, all the way back down, and all over Afghanistan as well. In my journal that I was mentioning, it shows a 26-year-old on decline. I'd never been sick before I was there. And as we go through that summer of 2003 and getting into the fall, I'm having everything from respiratory issues to what I now recognize as endocrine system issues, to gastrointestinal issues. And for the final FU in February of 2004, I went into the MASH unit, which, a little bit of trivia, the last active MASH unit in the U.S. Army before they started calling them something else was located in Uzbekistan. But I went into the MASH unit with a stomach ache and was diagnosed with appendicitis and woke up 2 days later after having had my appendix taken out in a tent right there at K2 Air Base. So I have an old school appendectomy scar on top of everything else. But I got out of the Army very soon after I returned from Uzbekistan. The fly home story is kind of interesting too. You know, you picture soldiers returning home from war a particular way, right? They get with their unit, they put on their uniforms, they get on the plane lands on tarmac, they march off, their families are waiting there to go and hug them. Not me. Me and my partner, Joe, we got on a C-17 that was a casualty flight, so it was guys that had been injured in combat. We flew into Ramstein Air Base in Germany. They offloaded those patients off the C-17, loaded on some coffins, and we rode with coffins across the Arctic Circle down to Dover Air Base. They offloaded the coffins. My grandparents were still alive at the time. My grandfather was a retired colonel, Army colonel. I had called my dad from Germany saying, hey, I think I'm going to be stopping at Dover with these bodies. So we land at Dover. My grandfather comes up, gets access to the base, and meets me at the base with my grandmother, which was kind of unexpected. Two things happened that day. I saw my grandfather, my grandmother, and I saw grass for the first time in 10 months. You know, something green, something wet. That night, we flew down to South Carolina. Me and my buddy Joe, we caught a C-130. And that was as far as we could get. We had to get back to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is about 6-hour drive from there. So we hitched a ride with some other dudes over to the civilian side of the airport in South Carolina, rented a car. We still had like our M4s and all of our gear. And Joe drove me to my house. And I went to my house and called my boss and said, funny story, I'm home. Can you come get my rifle? So my story is a little bit unusual with respect to how I did anything, right? You know, I like to say that the real heroes in this story are the guys that go out, right? I'm what's known as a POG, a person other than grunt, right? POG. The real guys are the guys, the trigger pullers, the guys that are in combat arms. They're flying combat missions. They're in special forces. They're infantrymen. They're artillerymen. They're cavalrymen. Those guys are out there risking their lives. What I'm doing is, in some vague way, indirectly helping them do that by keeping water flowing, by keeping heroin from getting into their blood, from keeping them from killing each other when they're not out killing the enemy. But I want to make it real clear that those guys are suffering the most from this, and those are the guys that we owe the most who go to combat. You know, those guys bring combat to the enemy. I've been shot at, sure, a bunch, direct and indirect fire, but that found me, right? I didn't go out and bring that to anybody. That was incidental to what I was doing. Could have been walking to that tent latrine, not in Uzbekistan, they didn't shoot us in Uzbekistan, or driving my thin-skin right-side drive Land Cruiser to who knows where to do who knows what. But I got home, I got out of the Army, I got my current job. It's actually exactly the same credential that I had when I was on active duty. So I left the Army on a Friday and just drove down to Florida and started working that Monday. Same badge, same credentials, totally different job, totally different authority, right? You know, federal agents have a completely different set of authority from the active duty agents under.
More?
Yes. Yeah.
So you fucking elevated.
A little bit more money, a little bit more responsibility. Yeah, you know.
Can you arrest people?
Yeah, I do it all the time.
So you just but are they military only, or can you arrest civilians?
I have not worked a case on an active duty soldier since 2007.
So you were arresting civilians for what?
You name it. So,
but how is the Department of Defense arresting civilians?
Because it's the agency itself using federal agents that are specific to federal law enforcement, right? So we're not in the Army. I'm arresting people who steal. Generally, is what I'm doing. So the stuff that happened with Steve Bannon today, the shuffling the money around from the charity and putting it into personal accounts.
I'm not familiar with Steve Bannon.
So he was a guy. I think he was on the Trump election committee in 2016. He came from a website. Anyhow, he and a couple other guys set up a charity to build a wall along the southern border. They got like $25 million. And they divided it up amongst the four of them. So, and that's a pretty common scheme, right? You set up a charity, then you set up shell companies, right? So you set up your charity that says, okay, this is what we're going to do. In this case, build a wall, right? And then you have a couple guys set up shell companies, Joe's construction company, Joe's super great wall company, Joe's concrete company. And then you send money to them, but they're not real. And then the accounts that are associated with those businesses, those are your accounts. And then you get the money. And
they don't build shit.
Right.
That's fraud.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
cut and dry though.
Yeah.
But that's cut and dry fraud.
Yeah, that's cut. I mean,
what do they think they're going to get away with that shit?
100% of the time. And
why?
I don't know. And I know I don't look like that guy. And so I wear a suit, right? Like there's going to be people watching, especially if like prosecutors or some of these politicians see this, they're going to be like, that guy has tattoos, because there's people I've known 20 years that don't know that I do. Because I dress professionally generally. I mean, when I'm in my office with my guys, no, but when I'm in court or when I'm out, doing stuff, generally I'll wear a suit, unless it's someone like you're describing where they think they can get away with it, and I'll show up like this. And you can kind of see these are guys that
do they know? Are you undercover?
By the time we show up, they know they're in trouble. Yeah. And P.S. By the time we do show up, we don't actually need to talk to you anymore. Like when you see it in the movies and they're like, advise them of their rights. Nope. No. By the time we show up, it's all over but the crying. That is. Because
you guys don't make a move until you know. No.
We got to know. No. Yeah, you got to know. You can go anytime there's a press release like today. The reason I know all this is I read the affidavit this morning that they released. And it's an affidavit that I've seen written, a dozen times or more in my career. It was very, I can't believe I'm commenting on this, but it was very straightforward, kind of chicken shit fraud. The Postal Service did a great job as Postal Service IG did the investigation. I work with them from time to time. They did a really great investigation, but I'm sure that there was a moment in the investigation where they're just shaking their heads like, I can't believe this is this easy, because it's right there. Right now, you got to know where to look. But it's just not hard. Everywhere you go, you leave a trail, right? Especially now. But when policing started back whenever, there's a French guy, and I can't remember his name, and everybody's gonna be howling at me for not remembering his name. But he had a saying. He says, when you commit a crime, you leave something there and you take something away. This is a dude that didn't know about DNA or blood type or any of that stuff. Same as with fraud. You can't move $25 million without somebody noticing a breadcrumb, especially not if you're affiliated with a politician or.
And not only that, they must not have been too smart, because you can get away with shit.
Oh, sure.
Based on the law. Like, for example, there's $25 million. Okay, I can legally take, for example, 92%.
Sure.
And we can call it administrative fees, and we can fly and have meetings in frickin' Greece. And we can have great meals while we're in Greece having these meetings. But for example, 8% has to actually go to build the fucking wall. Now, again, I'm not saying those are the rules,
yeah.
But there's rules, I'm sure,
yep.
that they could have just abided by and not, they still could have been fraud. It's still fraud, but they at least could have freaking danced around the law and the loopholes.
Didn't even try. They tried to cover it. What I found.
Who'd they raise the money from?
Donors.
Just regular people?
Yeah, they did like a GoFundMe.
So I see a GoFundMe out there that says, hey, we're going to raise money to build the wall, and I put money in there and that wall never gets built. Those people are in trouble.
Correct. Yeah, because because they've set up a 501c3 or 501c4, I think in this case.
What if you didn't?
If you didn't set up the 501c3, you're saying that you did. It's all about what you're presenting yourself to be. Once you start making these there's all sorts. That's what we're talking about now. Federal laws, right? There's all sorts of federal laws, and state laws, and local laws, international laws, and all sorts of things. Banking laws, everything that covers down on all this stuff. And it's certainly not my area of expertise. That particular type of fraud, but when I read it, I mean, it's just I can explain it to a layman, and you're just like, yeah, that sounds super illegal.
Do you think they started out with good intentions?
No, not in this case. I think they at the was there a seed, a germ at the very beginning? Yes. When I read that, I'm like that first couple of weeks when the guy had the idea, the original guy had the idea. They were probably like, this is legit. We're going to build a private wall on this dude's ranch. And then they're like, we got $25 million.
That's a lot of fucking money. Right. Yeah, because one night I got pissed off that they're basically deleting people's posts. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of doctors saying, shit that for some reason they just keep deleting the posts. But I'm like, dude, there should be a platform that there's no censorship. Period. I'm going to start one. So I started a GoFundMe, which I've never done. and I had within like an hour, I had like $6,000 raised. And then I thought, fuck, I'm not doing this. And so I hit refund and I had to call them and say, I'd like to refund everybody's money. And they basically, I'm telling you, they basically almost said I didn't have to. They said, are you sure? I said, well, yeah, because I'm not going to do this. So I need to refund all these people that have donated me because number one, I'm somewhat of a public figure. Mm-hmm. Dude, if number one, number two, well, number one, I have integrity. Number two, I'm a public figure. But if I would have almost listened to the GoFundMe people, they almost kind of insinuated that you can just keep that money. And I'm like, I don't want the fucking money.
Good call.
But dude, if I would have kept that money, that's technically. And didn't do it, that's fraud.
Yeah. I mean, $6,000, you're going to be hard pressed to find someone like me to come knock on your door.
Yeah, it went 25 million. But that's where I was going. I was going with, I thought, I'll raise 10, 20 G's and frickin' get my programming team to make a little, startup company. Dude, if I'd have said that and all of a sudden the whole world said, yeah, we want a frickin' censorship-free platform because we should have one. Right now, you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook. Those are owned. They're on Twitter. Those are owned. Somebody says something they don't like, they get rid of it. There should be a platform that is uncontrollable. Like I always say the president, because again, Trump always gets fucked with so much. I always say the president, regardless if it's Trump or anybody, the president should have a direct to the citizen channel that cannot be altered.
Well, I mean, you kind of just described 4chan and 8chan.
That's that Chinese one?
It is kind of like a anonymous message board where if you go to 4chan, you'll see it. I've had some stuff lined up. Like we'll be working on a case and, we don't make public a lot of times what we're doing. And suddenly you find yourself on 4chan. And it's, like I said, until very, very recently, for example, now, I was very much allergic to publicity. I had a professional allergy to it. Because of what I do, but then I got to thinking, one, I have a cause that's probably more important than my, general distaste for that. But two, it can
ruin cases.
Can ruin cases, right? So, but for me, I don't really work them anymore. I supervise. So
can you confirm or deny if there's any on me? You'll never see my name on your charts. Trust me when I tell you.
You won't.
I keep telling people when they always ask me, to me, freedom is the most valuable thing. Like freedom. Like, dude, if I had to live, if they said, Brad, you're going to live with no money above a 7-Eleven and you're going to work 12 hours a day at the 7-Eleven as the fucking clerk, period, your whole life, but you can be free. You can come and go and do what you want and see who you want and go where you want and everything's great. Or you can fucking be a criminal and potentially get locked up. I'm working at 7-Eleven, brother.
Yeah, man. You asked me what the most common reason that we catch people is they get greedy. If you aren't greedy and if you're smart about it, you'll get away with it. We're catching the dumb ones, man.
That's funny. Hey, if I got any criminals listening, there's a little encouragement for you. Fuck, use your head. You won't get caught.
That's it. Don't be stupid.
I'd say don't do it.
Yeah, right.
I'd say you're stupid even if you do it and you're the most ingenious sumbitch on the planet. You know why? Because I think eventually it's going to come back and get you.
I've been in a lot of federal prisons and a lot of other prisons at every level, and precisely 0 of them have been nice.
What about the finding money? Because I think to myself, if I'm in Iraq and I'm going through the neighborhood and doing what I'm told, looking for insurgents, whatever it is I'm doing, and I fucking kick in the door of a palace and I see a fucking gold Rolex, guess what? I'm gonna be back to the base wearing my gold Rolex.
So
that's a spoil of war. You should be able to keep that shit.
So and I don't know when the regulation was made. It might have existed during World War II, but everybody's got their granddad something that he took from somebody in World War II. But somewhere around that time, they put it into the Uniform Code of Military Justice that you can't take spoils of war. So it's an actual within the military. There's a law that's saying that you can't do that.
See, they ruined it.
As individuals, I would say. So units can take certain things.
Yeah, but that's confiscation.
Yeah, I mean, that's words.
Units can't take it and split it.
No. It goes back to the unit, and then it becomes, a piece of a unit museum or sits in front of their.
Can it be liquidated and fund the unit?
No.
Like my unit had swimming pools and fucking.
Well, depending on which palace you had in Iraq, talking about Iraq, some of them had swimming pools. There was an Australian compound when I was in Baghdad. They had a swimming pool and a bar and all that other stuff. I never went there. We weren't.
Who funded that?
That was they could look at the draw. They got Saddam's old pool palace. I got the one that had been bombed out 3 times during the war. So.
So have you ever personally witnessed like pallets of money?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but
Stacks.
Planes full.
Have you ever seen Three Kings?
Yes. Yeah, I figured we were going there.
Is that real?
So I don't know that story's real. I know that there are stories about those sorts of things happening, stuff that disappeared. Because of what Occam's razor suggests that whatever the easiest answer is, that's probably the answer, right? So if something like that does disappear, if all that gold does disappear and the Americans are there, my guess is that in the vacuum of the chaos after the invasion, somebody went in there and took it that knew that it was there way before we got there, right? So that's what I. But so if all of Saddam's missing, because there is missing treasure, right? The treasury was looted. Maybe, like I said, maybe they're smart. I don't.
Well, the only way to be smart would be to come home and never show its benefit. That it's like, dude, you steal $100 million, but you can't spend it. That's my point. Why would you steal? Because to be smart, dude, you cannot spend it.
Don't go steal a pallet of fresh sequential $100 bills and mail them home to your mom and your grandmother, and then have your meth head brother steal them and buy 25 Harley Davidson motorcycles and build a meth lab with it, because you'll get caught.
Has that happened?
Oh, sure.
What's the most someone sent home?
Oh, millions.
So I could just be sitting there, my brother's in the war, and all of a sudden I get a package and there's millions of cash in it?
Yeah.
That happened?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Dude.
I don't know how we got all the way down here, but yeah, I mean, so this funny thing, you get 25 years of stories, right? So.
What about child trafficking?
Sure. We've worked those cases. There's task forces in most states that have been up for many, many years that deal specifically with that. Now, my agency, my part of my agency doesn't deal with that, but I know of the existence of those agencies and those task forces, and they're run. Most U.S. attorneys' offices throughout the country have a task force dedicated only to that.
And do you think it's possible? You've heard of Q.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You think any of that's possible to be actually fucking true? That the part I'm talking about is that the highest officials, the highest of government, the highest of people are actually involved, which is why a lot of it went uncovered up until what seems like is starting to unravel. The old Epstein. You look at Jeffrey Epstein's face, and then you look at the him laying on the slab, and you put them side by side, you can clearly see that's not the same person. At least that's what it appears. Now, you don't know if the photo was doctored, so I don't go off on conspiracy tangents. But if that is a real photo, and you've heard, well, Epstein's not dead. Well, that doesn't look like Epstein.
Yep, dead people don't look like they did when they were alive, especially ones that died violently. So strangulation, even if it's self-strangulation, which, again, because I've been doing this for so long, I don't get into a lot of the conspiracies, because again, Occam's razor would suggest that what does the evidence show directly, right? What does it show? Well, it shows a guy in a cell alone with a sheet, and then he hanged himself. But when you hang yourself, you go unconscious really quick, right? 5, 6, 7 seconds, and then you die 15 minutes later as your diaphragm slowly pumps blood into your lungs. That's gross. Like you twitch and you flop around. It's an unpleasant death, and that changes the way that you look. And then add to that those features, because you're going to be puffy and dead, and your blood's going to pool. You're going to look different. So and then if somebody takes a sneaky little cell phone picture with shitty light on a bad angle with a sheet covering half your head, that checks out. I've seen a lot of dead bodies.
Yeah.
So with respect, the Q child trafficking thing I've heard about, but with respect to Epstein, that's all public record, and you can read the affidavits from those previous cases. I've done it. I can't remember where they are, but those were all released by a judge a couple weeks ago. So you can go in there and read what the investigation was. And it says exactly what it was. I can tell you that he was for sure a pedophile. He was for sure trafficking in underage people. That Maxwell lady certainly does appear to have been some sort of a pimp, for lack of a better word. He had other ones.
Were the Clintons involved?
So involved, they were friends with him.
See, I don't even want to talk about this. I don't have security detail.
I mean, I don't think anybody's. I mean, when I look at that stuff,
I don't want to get Clintoned.
I look at the investigation and I say, okay, what would I do in that situation? One, I would run as far and as fast away from it as I can and give it to somebody else. But if you do have something like that with a prominent person that is friends with someone that has been doing nefarious things. Lots of people do lots of terrible things, and rich people, and we're not talking about people that are wealthy. We're talking that's like mega rich, or you're an ex-president, or you're a prince or something like that. Like that's like the 1% of the 1%.
Above reproach.
Correct. So they're doing whatever they want, and I think they took advantage of that. So we know what Epstein was doing. We know who he was with, and we can infer from that. We know at least he was doing that. And we know what the women are saying. And the only thing that I would need to see to be convinced of something is evidence. And I mean actual evidence. Like actually to look down at something and say, okay, there's the flight log. Here's a picture. Here are 5 different, individual statements taken from people that don't otherwise know each other that all match the evidence that they're suggesting we should look at. So, and what you're hearing from me is just the way an investigation is done. There's too many people involved for like one guy to go rogue. It happens. It happened in an infamous Navy case out in San Diego. They call it the Fat Leonard case.
What happened with Fat Leonard?
Fat Leonard was bribing admirals.
I guarantee this is going to be the longest episode ever.
I'm so sorry.
That's good.
Fat Leonard was I think he was Indonesian or Thai. I think it might have been Thailand, but he was a shipping guy. Like he owned port space that the Navy would use, and he was bribing admirals to bring their ships in and giving them millions of dollars in hookers and planes and all sorts of other stuff to do that to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions. I mean, this is an enormous case. And I'm not involved in it. This is all things that I've read in the newspaper. I want to make very clear that I'm not talking about any actual investigations, with the exception of the one about mail and money home. That for sure happened a bunch. This is circa 07, 08. But Fat Leonard wound up getting caught because they lured him back to the United States, saying that some admiral wanted to bribe him, and as soon as he landed, he was arrested by the FBI. Well, during all this, an NCIS agent, which would be my counterpart, right, in a different agency, he wound up being a mole. Like he was going in there and looking at the case and providing information to Fat Leonard. And so they created like a whole second case for this guy to go in there and get fake information, feed it to Fat Leonard so they could catch him. And that dude rightfully got, I can't remember, like 20 years or something like that. I remember when he was sentenced, he had the tearful, "I'm very sorry." It's good. It's called an allocution. You admit to it, and sometimes the judge would be like, "Oh, you seem sad. Here's, instead of 25 years, here's 22," or something like that. And he did that, and I'm pretty sure his argument. This guy's like 45 years old. And this, I might be completely wrong. Someone can look this up, and I don't care if I'm wrong. But I remember it was this sad story that like I'm a virgin and I live by myself, and I just wanted friends, and he was my friend, and he completely cashed in his integrity and 25 years worth of service, and screwed over the investigation and all that other stuff.
Damn. Well, I bet you it's also money.
Well, it's money. So it all comes back to greed, right? It just be good or be good at it. That's it, man.
Folks, I didn't know we were going to teach you how to do crime, but there it is. If you're going to do it well.
I have that. I got that embroidered, and I have that hanging on the wall in my office, because half the time when I look at something, I'm just like, what are you doing?
What an idiot.
Why would you do that?
I'll tell you, if you, I have a couple buddies in the FBI, got a couple buddies that are cops, undercover, all kinds. And they always say, dude, the busts and everything are usually the dumb people.
Yeah.
They say there's so much shit that they never catch people doing, but they're just what you see on the news are just all the dumb ones that like, I can't believe you fucking thought you'd get away with that.
We're so busy with the dumb ones that there's no way that I have any time for the ones that are just brilliant about it. You know, you look at Madoff talking about financial crime. He wasn't smart. He wasn't good at that. It was a pyramid scheme. And some dude starting in like 2000 was reporting him to the SEC like every 6 months for like 10 years until finally someone's like, we ought to take a look at this. And then like they went, I remember when Madoff's son went into the room, the secret room where all the work actually happened, it was like piles of boxes and shredded paper. There's nothing in there. That's when the scheme, that was significant. But Madoff wasn't smart, right? He was an idiot, but nobody checked on it. Just, you know, nobody, and I'm not casting aspersions on that. You know, that's shit happens. I mean, I've made tons of mistakes. You could fill a book with my mistakes. You know, this page of paper probably has my success. We're talking about all my success right now.
Yeah, well, nowadays with your iPhones, the tracking that they have, Project Echelon, things where I believe we're being listened to right now. Matter of fact, your phone's right there, my phone's right here. Somebody knows we're together.
Well, I told a bunch of people I was coming here, but
not to mention if they wanted to hear what we were saying,
so
that I believe this can activate with or without my knowledge.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not like that guy. Like, I'm not telling you that I've sat in secret rooms, but yeah, I mean, for sure. Yeah, you know, people talk about it. I'm not a guy. We'll get back to K2, PJ. People talk about the sign of the beast and being tracked, and you already have it. This has a number, and it's in your pocket, dipshit.
Wherever you go.
Wherever you go. And the companies have it. The government doesn't have to do this. You're doing it to yourself. So the only thing that the government needs is a justifiable reason that an objective third party agrees with, and then we can take it. So the Constitution works, and it works very, very well. You cannot, and that's why you hear about when the government messed up, because that's transparency. And by the way, I'm not saying that transparency is universal, but generally, to get that information, you have to have probable cause, right? And that's how you get a warrant, and then that's how you get that evidence. That's how the systems work since the 18th century. And that works. You can't BS it, because the guy you're giving it to, the magistrate or the judge that you're giving it to, is going to very carefully review that after it's been reviewed by a whole bunch of other people.
Like a grand jury?
That's the other way you can do it. Is you can go to grand jury will get you subpoenas and indictments, or you can go to a magistrate will get you a search warrant. So it just depends. I mean, there's lots of tools, and all of it is documented. Grand juries do operate in secret while they're current, and then later, all that stuff the transcripts are all released. Like eventually, everything is declassified, right? It just eventually. We'll call it 98%. I don't deal in that world at all, thank God. But I know how it works. You know, yeah. I've been around it.
So back to K2.
Yeah.
Back to K2.
That's a good rabbit hole.
Well, the reason why, I went there just out of interest, but the reason why it's good we went there is because this was I was asking you earlier. You would think with your current job, it's not like you're some veteran that's freaking been out for 100 years, you're smoking crack, and you're a current federal agent, and you are simply walking in saying, "Hey, folks, we need to get Uzbekistan or K2 on the 38 CFR," and somebody would probably, unless there's something they're hiding. I mean, I don't know. This is where the conspiracy goes crazy. Like, why wouldn't they just fucking add it? Like, here, watch. I'm the clerk. What's going on? Oh, okay. Oh, absolutely. I'll get that done. I just need Governor, Shitstain to sign it. And I need 3 people from the oversight committee of the 38 CFR document. And then someone goes, okay, well, when do they meet next? Next week. Oh, can you come talk to them? And then they go, oh, you're correct. Give them our apologies. We left it off. There you go. And like your whole mission would have taken fucking 3 weeks.
Right. So I'm incredulous too. It doesn't make sense. still, it doesn't make sense. And when you talk to some of these different offices, a lot of it has to do, it's politics.
Bureaucracy?
Right? It's bureaucracy, it's politics, it's competing interests, it's timing, it's who's running for re-election. It's a whole host of things that cause these delays, right? So, for example, the reason I'm here and the reason I'm so forcefully talking for this and a whole bunch of other things is because I was alone thinking that I was sick. I thought it was normal that people in their mid-20s have hypothyroidism, profound hypothyroidism, which, so the medicine I mentioned, Synthroid, normal dose for that is between 25 and 100 micrograms. Depends on the person. The pills go all the way to 300. I take 400. I weigh 150 pounds. It's just this preposterously high dose, and that's just to keep my endocrine system functioning.
So the common, why wouldn't they just, when they got to the base, move? Hey, look at all this toxic shit. We better move.
Because we had to complete the mission. It's mission first. It really, truly is. And because they knew, based on what was there, that the effects would not be instantaneous. Once they moved stuff around, it wouldn't immediately cause the effects that it did. So while I was there, it's a lot like Las Vegas. The mountains are a little bit farther away. It's not really in a valley. It's more like in the steppes, they call them. So kind of grassland. So it's green in the spring, brown in the summer through winter. But the base itself, they built that berm, right? And so that created a bowl. So the water, when it hit this berm, would go both directions. It would flow down into the camp, flood the camp. Again, when you guys go to the website, take a look at the pictures that a lot of the members and stuff have loaded in. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And it went the other way into those ponds I was telling you about. We called those ponds Skittles Pond because they changed colors and they glowed at night. There was fields that looked like will-o-wisps. The little, especially in the Northeast where I'm originally from the DC area. You go out in the countryside and you get those little glowing things in the field at night. It looked like that, except not quite right, and it was all the way down on the ground. And this is something I found out February or March of this year. After I wrote about it in my journal because shit's glowing, but it kind of confirmed that I wasn't crazy, because you start feeling like you're crazy a little bit in spite of what I do, in spite of everything I've done since. And you feel like you're the only person going through these things. And again, I'm lucky, right? So I'm a federal employee, so I have good health insurance. So I can go to my doctor and I can say, my thyroid's messed up. Cool, here's medicine. And I pay my copay and I just take my medicine. If I get sick, if I got in a motorcycle wreck a couple of years ago, I just get surgery. We have guys that don't have that option, right? So we have I'm not going to drop any names, but they're out there, but the guys that reach out to us, PJ now, that's all he does basically. He's the executive director of the charity, but he has a good board working for him, so we're able to do stuff autonomously. But people reach out to him saying, help me. I need your help, kind of like a veteran service organization. We have a guy that reached out to us several weeks ago, and you can go on the website. Actually, I will say his name. You can go on the website and read his story. His name's Brian Liebenow, and he wrote a pretty profound essay for us. He was at K2, 2001, 2002. Around the time that Kim Brooks' husband was there. And he was home maybe 18 months. He was my age, 25, 26 at the time. And he got diagnosed with a super rare lymphoma, and I think it was in his neck. Long story short, the cascade of diseases that have happened that are, look, I can't tell you it definitely happened there, but it sure is weird that all these people are getting sick, right? And, maybe this is where you and I can wink at each other and be conspiratorial, but how much anecdotal evidence do you need to suggest that shit was dirty, right? That it was toxic. This dude now has a feeding tube in one arm. As his body, as he says it, as his body descends into entropy. We had now
no one will help him.
He's getting help because it happened while he was in service. But we have a guy up in the Florida Panhandle that his wife's a school teacher, and he was a veteran, and he got out, and he was doing some contracting work of some sort. And he started getting very, very sick. And he went to the VA, and they said, where were you? And he said, K2. And they're like, sorry, can't help you. Can't do that preventative care. Can't get the care for the diseases that came from that place. They won't help him until he's sick. And that's really what's happening. Because we can't get the preventative care, you have people getting these profound disease processes, and then they'll help. Secretary of the VA, Secretary Wilkie, probably about 4 months ago, was asked by a reporter, kind of an ambush question at a press conference. And the reporter says, "Are you going to help the veterans of K2?" And he says, "The veterans of K2 can get help." Yep, we can. We can. Sure we can. When we're sick. That's not what this is about. Even with my health insurance, I can't go to my primary care physician or to my endocrinologist and say, "Man, I don't feel right. All these weird things are happening. Can we do some scans and some tests?" They're expensive. Insurance not going to pay for them. She doesn't have a diagnosis code. So she doesn't have a diagnosing code because the VA's not recognizing this place where we can get those codes from. So my problem with her is the same problem that these soldiers are having with the VA, is they can't go in there and get seen, right? Documented that there was depleted uranium at K2, right? If a K2 veteran goes in to the VA today and says, "I want a depleted uranium test," they will not give it to them because it's ludicrous, right? I wish that I could sit here and tell you that there's a really good reason that this doesn't exist, but there's not. There simply isn't. So after we testified in Congress, and I know we're running long, so I'll
keep going.
sprint to the finish. But after we testified in Congress, the pandemic hit, and we established the 501c3, and we needed some policies and procedures. I hadn't done it before, but I've dealt with the law, so I wrote up some policies and procedures based on some other similar charities and some friends that work in that world. We established the board of directors, and we built the website, and all that time I started learning how to lobby. And the way that you lobby is you either go up on Capitol Hill and knock on doors. Access costs money. We don't have money. We do have a K2 veteran who is a K Street lobbyist who has been advising, but their paying clients obviously get priority, which is cool because their advice is really all I need. Because as it turns out, all you have to do is go up there and ask. You're not going to get anything without you ask. So once you understand how the process works, that's how you do it. We already have legislation that says most of what we need. So you go to other House representatives and you get them to co-sponsor. You either talk to them, or you talk to their staff, and you get their constituents who are K2 veterans to call them and get them to sponsor these varying pieces of legislation. Fast forward to July, and we got probably about 30, 40 House members to co-sponsor, and about that many senators to co-sponsor as well, meaning that they'd be interested to co-sponsor in House and then possibly put something in the Senate. The way these bills usually go, they don't stand alone. They get added as amendments to other pieces of legislation. Since this deals with veterans, it'll go into the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. It went in to be looked at, and the only piece of it that made it into that piece of legislation was the part about doing an epidemiological study. That's fine. It says you're going to do an epidemiological study on K2 veterans. That's cool. But if you do a multi-year study on the K2 veterans, we're losing 2 or 3 a month. And by losing, I mean they're dying. We don't know how many are dead, dozens. But right now we know we're at a rate of about 2 or 3 a month because the disease processes are going on. So the one thing we don't really have is time, at least not for some of them. But to my mind, one of them is too many. So after that, after we lost in the House, it's pretty disappointing. And I don't want to say that we lost, but we didn't get what we wanted, right? So, and it wasn't final, but it felt bad. So we were disappointed. But disappointment does not allow for mercy. So we didn't show any. So we started hitting up the Senate, and we started hitting up the House, and we started hitting up the media and doing whatever we could, trying to drum up. And at the same time, Representative Green and Representative Lynch were demanding that the DOD release those documents. So the DOD finally declassified all the documents that were contemporary to the studies that were done at K2 while it was still in existence. And all of those documents show that those 400 chemicals were there and that there was radiation 100% of the time anyone was there. So, and that bears repeating. The whole time, every single American that was deployed there was at K2. They were exposed to radiation 100% of the time. So the DOD's own documents admit that all these things happen. Now, one of the reasons we need a study is because no one's done one. Yeah, of course we need an epidemiological study. You know what else we need to do? We need to go back to the site, to K2. The base isn't there anymore, but the stuff is still there. Send somebody down there. Hell, send me there with Vice and a scientist, and we'll make a documentary out of it. Let's go and find out what's actually there, because that's never been done. So after those documents were released, and after we just simply went out and started hitting as many people as we can to support something, senators started listening. And there are now 3 bills specific to K2. 2 of them have already been introduced. There's one pending in addition to that, the big Toxic Exposure Act that's also going through there. And that's happened because you get politicians that care. And this is all nonpartisan. I mean, to my mind, this is something that people should be able to get behind. There's not really a political side to this, except for when there is. I wish I could tell you where the resistance is. I don't know. I could probably take a guess, but I don't know for sure. I don't understand all the levers. I've only seen some of them so far because I'm still new to it. Also, it's all being done via Zoom.
Well, I think it's going to be quicker than you think.
Yeah, I think we're going to get something. And I want to make that clear. Getting anything is a win. We went from not being talked about, not even being heard about. I think there might have been a Wikipedia page that was like a paragraph long. It's probably still a paragraph long. Maybe not after this, but until recently, it was just a paragraph saying K2 Air Base existed here, and the U.S. used it for 3 years, and then they left. Doesn't really talk about the toxins. Doesn't really talk about the people getting sick. So the recognition by itself, I don't want to say it's enough, but it gets us moving in the correct direction. That's always going to be my goal here. I don't need anything other from them except for them to acknowledge that we were there, because they're not doing that yet. And these little pieces of legislation are finally starting to do that. And if I had any word to say to any of those politicians, it's thank you and how can I help?
Folks, here's what I'm thinking as you're talking. Like, who is in charge of changing the CF? The what is it? 38 CFR.
Yeah, so it's the Code of Federal Regulations, and that's basically where anything that regulates anything within the federal government that goes. And 38 CFR is the chapter that deals with health benefits and veterans and things like that. And then there's a specific subchapter. It's 3317.1, I believe. I'd have to look it up, but it's in there somewhere. And that's where they define what Southwest Asia is. So in the 38 CFR, they say, okay, veterans that were deployed to Southwest Asia, here's the recognized disease processes, all of which are present in K2 veterans. Here are the countries that are recognized as Southwest Asia. And it's Iraq and Kuwait and actual Southwest Asia, but they added Afghanistan, right? Afghanistan borders Uzbekistan.
So how did they add that?
So basically a congressman sponsors legislation. It gets voted on and added to whatever.
That's it.
That's it.
So a senator needs to sponsor something.
They basically just need a House and a Senate bill, or they could just tag it on into any other piece of legislation, right? Make it an amendment. Yeah. Say we need to modify 38 CFR to add Uzbekistan to whatever. And some of these other pieces of legislation are excellent, right? That they provide for presumptive conditioning, but when you put it in there like that, it allows for some modification, right? So at this point, it feels like the simplest way to do it would be to add those things into the CFR. I'm not the expert.
And then everybody would be happy.
I think that gets us a long way, because it gives us recognition.
And help.
Right?
Now you qualify.
Immediately. It gives them qualified help. That's
yeah,
correct.
So I'm a problem solver. So I'm just thinking, what would I do in certain situations? Well, number one, donate money. Where do people donate if they just want, if they don't know any congressmen or senators or any political ties, how can they just donate and help you guys?
So we do have a donate button on the website.
You'd be dumb if you didn't.
Yeah, it's on. You go to strongholdfreedomfoundation.org, and top right corner it says donate. Click on that, and that's the easiest way to provide that way, because we do once the Rona is gone or it's modified or whatever, we're going to be back on Capitol Hill.
Now, what happens if, because you're listening to the Bomb Squad and we take action, you got like $100 million donated, not for real, but let's pretend you did, and then next week a senator got it passed through. What are you going to do with the $100 million?
We would continue advocacy for all the other veterans organizations that are trying to get toxic exposures generally covered. Because, so I'm a niche product, right? 10,100 people, 40% of which really are affected by this. We're very small. Well, there's millions of veterans that can't get coverage because of all sorts of other loopholes. Imagine this is one loophole for one word. Imagine the really complicated ones.
Yeah. So you just start helping other folks.
Of course.
That's awesome. Donate money, folks. Go to StrongholdFreedomFoundation.org. Donate $5, $50, $500. Number 2, reach out to your senators. Just start introducing them. Tag Mark, tag Stronghold Freedom Foundation. Tell them they need to look into it. Like, say something. Tag somebody. Send an email. Send a letter to your senator.
Yes. So we have, again, on the website, I've put a very simple one-page form that describes all these bills and what they do and why we support them. And the real answer is we support all of them, and we thank every single congressman and senator and their staffs for helping us get to this point.
Seems like if you get the right one, dude, the problem's going to be solved, or at least the beginning is.
Right. It's the beginning, right? So, and again, it begins with recognition. I've harped on the 38 CFR because I'm trying to be logical, right? Occam's razor again. Using that investigative mind, what is the simplest way to figure out how to solve this problem?
Yeah. Get it listed.
Just get it listed.
Yeah, and it's simple. That's simple to do. It doesn't cost billions of dollars. It's not going to topple governments. It means that if somebody's listening to this, you've got some connections, because people have connections, man. There could be someone listening to this that their dad's a senator or they're the senator. I might even have senators listening to this. Folks, this is why, in my opinion, you are a senator. This is why, like, at least for me, this is what I would be waiting for as a senator, meaning let's make some change. Let's make some shit happen that's right and deserved. So reach out to your senator. I say tag Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Okay? Because even though people say I'm like a Joe Rogan mixed with a Howard Stern and my shit's getting popular, folks, tag the people that are way more popular. Like tag Joe Rogan. And say, because Joe Rogan have you on his podcast, bro, it'll be solved instantly.
We had a shout out on Joe Rogan several weeks ago. We wound up sitting on screw it, I'll tell the story. We were sitting on a teleconference with a larger coalition, and it was one of Jon Stewart's aides was on the teleconference. So when it was our turn to talk, we essentially said the word K2 and black goo as many times as we could. And so when Joe Rogan had Jon Stewart on talking about, because Jon Stewart has been instrumental in a lot of this toxic exposure stuff and bringing it to attention. And I can't remember, he had a great way to pay for all this. It doesn't matter. But anyhow, yeah, sure enough, on that podcast, Jon Stewart made mention of it in passing to some other things. So, but yeah, my God, someone like Joe Rogan, yeah, this would be solved day after tomorrow.
Yeah, that's nice for Jon Stewart to mention it. But hey, let's get Joe Rogan to bring you on. He's in charge. He can do whatever the fuck he wants.
I don't know if I'm Joe Rogan level, but
sure you are.
I'll sit there.
Dude, if 10,100 fucking veterans are not Joe Rogan level, well then somebody's overestimating Joe Rogan's value. Okay, I'm telling you. So, and I know Joe would probably feel the same. Like if he heard you say that, he'd say the same thing. Like, what are you talking about, dude? I don't know Joe personally, but I think Joe would fucking jump on this. Why? Because, dude, if he's got the power to get those people help, let's get him some help. And his podcast can do it. So, folks, if you're listening, you know Joe Rogan, you don't know Joe Rogan. If everybody listened to this podcast, and there's shit tons of them, just tags Joe Rogan, you're next. Just say, Joe Rogan, you're next, hashtag Bomb Squad. Joe Rogan, you're next. Help Stronghold Freedom Foundation, just whatever you want to tag Joe Rogan and anybody else that you know with a podcast that is a big podcast. I'm going to tell my boy Andy Frisella, I bet you anything he'd probably freaking have you on. Ed Milet probably have you on. Why? For the sole purpose of freaking getting these veterans help, period.
I'll pay for it with more stories, man. I got a head full of them.
Okay, if you've got a podcast, invite him to be on yours, folks. Big or little, by the way.
Correct.
You never know who's listening to a podcast, dude. The other day I was on LinkedIn and it shows like, who's viewed your page. I was like, these guys are viewing my page? Like, holy shit. Like, I should have had something on the page. But at the end of the day, folks, if you're listening to this, do that. Donate money. Reach out to your senator. Tag Joe Rogan. Tag anyone with a big podcast. Invite Mark on. And most importantly, share this podcast out because someone that's listening might be the person we're looking for.
That's right.
And folks, if you guys aren't willing to do a little tiny tag and share, shame on you. Shame on you. Because again, I mean, dude, to me, the veterans, the soldiers, you know, I don't know how they define veteran. If you went and fucking dealt with that shit for our country, every citizen here, including the government, I believe, owes you a debt of gratitude for damn sure, but more importantly, owes you whatever it takes, because it's so stupid compared to what you guys did, to get the fucking attention or the help or the accountability to where the government has no choice.
They promised. We kept our end of the bargain.
Yeah, if this was I know what to do, folks. Let's make this the most listened to podcast on earth, and then I'll just bring him back. We'll do it one time, and I'll solve it. But anyway, folks, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this individual. I know we're going to have you back on another episode. At least I do. But again, hopefully K2's the solved by then, and we can just talk fucking stories.
Oh man, yeah.
Because dude, I wanted to get more, but I definitely want to make sure the attention goes to this. But like, I want to know more shit, so I'm going to have you back.
Sure, man. Anytime.
And I definitely appreciate you coming out here for this.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Folks, you guys go follow him at SFF_K2. Hit up his son-in-law at Here for a Kyle. I already tagged him once.
Nice.
And, remember, folks, share it out. It could be someone else that you shared it with that does the helping. Till next time, keep it real.